Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am here to inform you today that I was wrong. Yes, that's right. We're going to be taking another look at the legendary tier Italian battleship C. Colombo. And this time we're going to be using a different build. When I posted my first video on the Colombo the other day, I was running the Paolo di Revel build on the ship, and the reason I was doing that is so I could get more efficacy out of the secondaries. I was using a full secondary build on Paolo di Revel, and that was fine to a large extent. I mean, after all, Christopher Colombo, I think I'm mispronouncing that, but this ship has a large amount of secondaries. It's got 24 90mm secondaries and 18 152s. If you build them for full secondary builds, you can get them out to at least 10.2 kilometers. They don't have the fastest reload in the world, but they are SAP, so they deal a lot of damage when they do hit, provided they don't hit super angled targets. That is one of the downsides of the SAP secondaries, is that they're great when they're hitting targets they can pen and dealing damage. But unlike conventional HE secondaries that you would find on the German battleships, they're not super useful if you're pushing straight into an enemy and they're bow into you. At least with the German secondaries, a lot of them have quarter pens, so they can go through 32 millimeters of armor, they can actually deal penetration damage, and they can start fires on top of that to sort of stack dots over time. The SAP secondaries can't do that. They're all about raw damage as they make impact with the ship's hull. There is no damage over time, and unlike HE, SAP does care to some extent about angling, so if they're being fired at a bow-in ship, it's unlikely that they're going to do, untold amounts of damage. So instead of using Revel, we've got Iachino on here. I'll put the build up on the screen momentarily. You can see it's more or less my standard battleship build. We've got Cunningham and Kondo as inspirations. And we'll talk about what that does to the stats, but you could sort of get a taste now of what that does to the main battery. Remember that Colombo is equipped with 16 381mm or 15-inch guns. 15-inch or 381 millimeters is, to be fair, pretty small for the tier. There's only one other battleship with guns around that size, or of that size actually, and that would be the legendary French battleship Bourgogne, which, unlike the Colombo, that has 12 15-inch guns. This thing has 16 of them. And the accuracy at base is not good. It's not even that great when Iachino is at the helm, but it's certainly better. And well, Iachino is a little bit unique in that his base trait actually buffs the accuracy. It buffs the shell grouping depending on the ship type you're shooting at. And then you've got Cunningham stacked as an inspiration on top of them. That is a pretty good buff to the main battery shell grouping, and it certainly makes a noticeable difference. All of a sudden, this ship is a much better main gun platform with Iachino at the helm. Initially, I dismissed that. I said, these are inaccurate Italian battleship guns. There may be 16 of them, but if I was going to play a battleship at legendary tier that had good main gun firepower, I'd probably be choosing the Yamato or the Massachusetts or even the Bourgogne. That's what I said. That's how I justified to myself running the secondary build with Paolo di Revel. And after all, they are SAP secondaries, so there's that too. But I really didn't, I discounted how good Iachino could be and just how much value there would be into speccing into these guns. You can see we're about 5 minutes into the game. We've only taken a couple of shots and we're up to 81,000 damage. We've also got 3 citadels to boot, which I think is more citadels than I scored in any games with Di Revel at the helm. And now we're pushing up toward the alpha cap. Another one of the reasons I wanted to put Revel on there is because I think this is more of a brawling focus battleship where you want to take it into close range and you want to have these brawly sort of fights with other battleships. Well, you can still do that even if you are running main gun accuracy. The difference is, of course, that your guns are more effective even when you're not at point blank range. And that's useful in this kind of meta where it can be extremely difficult to push in and survive when you're playing a battleship. That is certainly true of the German battleships and the Italian battleships, or anything that you want to play in a brawling way. There's a lot of obstacles for you to reach your target if your intention is to brawl in a battleship. You've got torpedoes to worry about, which are bad enough, and then you've got the barrage of high explosive spam, courtesy of a lot of these cruisers. Here, I think we're checking the smoke firing penalty or the secondary range on our guns. I think we still are running the secondary module, by the way, rather than aiming systems mod 1, and maybe we ought to switch to get even a little bit more accuracy out of these main guns, but they seem fine without it. And with the secondary module, we do still have at least somewhat improved range on our secondaries, which is, let's see what it is with this current build. It is 6.8 kilometers, and I misspoke. We were not, in fact, running the secondary mod. This is aiming systems mod 1. And we still have 6.8 kilometers. I think we're running the Porcupine. No, we're not. Iachino does not have the Porcupine skill. This is just the improved range of the secondaries at base. So even if you aren't going to run into secondaries, they will range out, and they'll still hit things when you get into brawling range, which you can and you should do, because this ship is fun in those kind of scenarios with its armor. Of course, we don't really need to push in right here, right now. We've got the GK and we've got another battleship around the corner pushing into us. So we're going to allow them to do so and kind of kite away as they do. We'll run down the stats here and the differences with the Iachino build, by the way. And I think this is actually quite useful. Now, the turret traverse time is 34 seconds, which is not that great. The reload time is 30.1. So we do have it reduced at least somewhat, I think, thanks to the reload module in the fourth slot. Base reload is 33 seconds, which feels kind of bad. If you use the reload mod and cut it down to 30, that's more like standard battleship reload, despite the fact that you have so many guns. And the main battery gun range with Iachino is a much more respective 19.2 kilometers compared to the 17 point something you get with Revel. And that is helpful, especially at the legendary tier, where at least, or especially initially, these games are played at quite long range, and you really want the full range that you can get on these main battery guns to deal damage. Then, of course, Iachino's unique base trait, which buffs the main battery shell grouping depending on what type of ship you're shooting at, along with Cunningham as one of the inspirations. That's like a double buff to the shell grouping, and you can see even against angled targets like the likes of GK, we're able to dial the shells in reasonably well to the superstructure, hit that, and deal damage that way. And we've succeeded in this main capture circle here, this alpha cap. We've partially succeeded, at least. The enemy team has not been able to flip it. Our teammates are currently inside of it, flipping it, and the GK is going to go down soon, along with, I believe, the Giuseppe Verdi that is trying to support him inside of a smoke screen. We're a couple seconds away from taking the capture circle. I think we're going to get reset right here, and we do actually take a surprisingly chunky shot from either the GK or the Giuseppe. While the GK is shooting HE, and we're 1 second away from taking the cap, we're able to get it. The enemy team has both Bravo and Charlie, though, which is a problem. They also have way more ships than we do, and both of our destroyers are down. So if we are going to win this game, it is going to be an uphill battle. If it looks familiar to you, by the way, it's because it's a game that I played on my Friday stream. Played it with the intention of taking out the Iachino build and seeing how it went. And well, it went really well, at least in terms of damage. We're going to smoke up now. I don't know exactly what we're being spotted by, maybe a destroyer, but the idea was I wanted to get a better position on this Montana and maybe deal some more damage to him. Of course, the smoke firing penalty with these, or with this particular Italian battleship, is ridiculous. We're only detectable by 10.6 kilometers, I believe, when we fire our main battery guns inside of the smoke. So there is no way the Montana was going to spot us. And the fact that we shot and didn't get spotted by anything means that neither of the two enemy destroyers had a line of sight on us within 10.6 kilometers at the time. So hopefully that means as we push through this gap, we'll be reasonably safe from the torpedoes. Montana is bow into us now, which not ideal, but again, the buff that we've got to the shell grouping means we might be able to dial these shells right up into that superstructure for some juicy damage. And we're able to. We get the high caliber metal to boot and deal 13,000 damage straight to the Monty superstructure. Of course, we are at close range. Maybe the same thing would have happened without Iachino, but the Monty is dead. And at the very least now, the teams are down to parity in terms of ship numbers. It's 4v4, although the raw numbers are a little bit deceiving because obviously the enemy team has a huge advantage with two of its remaining ships being destroyers. Well, maybe less of an advantage, as we can see here. It turns out one of the two enemy destroyers, the Z-44, appears to have been AFK for the entirety of this game, which, kind of sad that the enemy team has managed to flip two caps and get as many points as they had with one hand tied behind their back in the form of an AFK DD, but what are you going to do? Meanwhile, here we are eating some torpedoes courtesy of the Shimakaze, who of course saw us coming and lined up some torpedoes pretty well there. I think we took two of them, but we are still floating, and we've got just below half health with a heal left. That is one nice thing about Iachino 2, by the way, is when you use these more accuracy-focused commanders, you do lose out on one of the big benefits of the more brawly guys, which is the master mechanic skill that gives you extra charges of the repair consumable. Usually only the brawling type battleship commanders like D Revel have any skill that allows you to get more charges of the repair party consumable. But that is not true of Iachino. He has a unique legendary skill called Testudo, which gives you at least one more charge of the heals. So even that is not a benefit you have to worry about giving up when you switch from Revel to Iachino. The argument really is, do you want more main gun firepower or do you want more secondary firepower? And honestly, I think the main gun firepower really is the way to go. These are 16 guns, and even if you don't build into the accuracy, you can benefit from the old throw enough shit at the wall, eventually some of it's going to stick, but if you can sort of buff the accuracy of that shit you're throwing at the wall, then you're going to get a lot more of it to stick a lot more consistently. And these are Italian guns with, despite the fact that they are relatively small battleship guns for the tier, they've got great penetration and they deal great damage when enough of the shells hit. The individual Alpha Strike on the AP is not all that great per shell. It's only 11k. But 16, 11k citadels right into some ship, that's enough to dev strike anything in the game. It also helps, too, when you're fighting a Gross first and for some reason it doesn't want to shoot at you. Clearly, the Colombo is the superior brawler. I think it does benefit from having less superstructure than the GK, so there is that. We did manage to take out that battleship, by the way. We've still got the Shimakaze to deal with. We know he's somewhere over to the right. But because we know generally where he is, we know exactly how to avoid his torpedoes. And we're really not going to take any more if we put ourselves between him and the island right here. At least that was the idea at the time. And we are ahead on points and, only a few seconds away from flipping Bravo. So we should win here. Right? Because, well, the Shima has launched his final shot at us and come up short. We're going to survive. We're going to flip the Alpha Cap, and we've still got two teammates left alive fighting the last battleship. So, oh, Well, the cruiser is dead in the final 30 seconds, and now the enemy team is ahead of us on points. So I guess this is going to be a tragic loss rather than a glorious victory. Perhaps a little bit more awareness on the part of my teammates may have been beneficial here. If the cruiser had looked at the scoreboard and noticed that we were ahead and there was less than a minute to go, perhaps he could have stopped firing, gone dark, and we would have won this game. But then again, I don't know how close he was to that battleship. Maybe it was impossible for him to stop shooting and go dark. In any case, he sunk, and because of that, the enemy team gets to walk away with a great victory, despite all the work we did. We did 227,000 damage with the Colombo. And I think this gives you an idea of how good Iachino can be on this ship. And now, I think I changed my recommendation. Iachino is definitely the way to go for Colombo. Hope you enjoyed the video. If so, give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.